Nathan Wells leaned back in the old rocking chair on his cabin porch, coffee steaming beside him, and let out a slow breath. After years buried under HOA threats, surprise inspections, and Karen's infamous patio height violation nonsense, he was finally free. His new home sat on 6 wooded acres just off a quiet lake. No HOA, no committee meetings, no Karen, just the way he wanted it. But peace never lasts long when ghosts know how to write letters. It started with a plain white envelope tucked between a local magazine and some junk mail. No return address, just his name, printed cleanly, Nathan Wells, nothing more. Inside was a single page, typed in a rigid, cold tone. Notice, the outdoor structure behind your dwelling does not meet current community sightline standards and must be removed within 14 days. Nathan squinted. What community? He didn't live in a gated subdivision. The closest neighbor was nearly half a mile down the road, and the only structure out back was a shed that came with the property. There was no signature, no letterhead, just a line at the bottom. Compliant communities make stronger futures. The phrase itched at his memory. It sounded like something Karen had once plastered across HOA newsletters back in Meadowstone Estates. At the time, Nathan had brushed it off as harmless propaganda until she used it to justify fining him $150 for hanging Halloween lights outside the seasonal window. He tossed the letter in a drawer, figuring it was some old HOA nutcase who got hold of his address from a public database. It wasn't worth worrying about. Not until the next letter arrived. This one came 3 days later, thicker. Inside were 5 glossy photos of his cabin, angled shots of the back porch, the firewood stack near the trees, even one of him walking his dog in the early morning heat. Each photo had small red circles drawn around random objects. No explanation, no note, just a new line typed across the top. Level to observations locked. Nathan's stomach sank. That night, he couldn't sleep. The woods outside no longer felt peaceful. Every sound, a branch snapping, a coyote in the distance, even the creak of his own deck sounded like someone moving. Watching, he checked the cameras he had mounted near the driveway. Nothing. No cars, no visitors, just still images of pine trees swaying in the wind and a raccoon sniffing a bag of mulch. The next morning, as he stepped outside to fetch firewood, he noticed something odd. His trash bins to Greene County issued containers had been knocked over, but not in a random mess. They were lying side by side, handles facing opposite directions, perfectly aligned. Years ago, Karen fined a man in Meadowstone for doing just that. She called it a bin reversal, claiming it disrupted the neighborhood aesthetic. At the time, Nathan thought she was joking. She wasn't. He stared at the bins for a long moment. This wasn't just some prank. That afternoon, Nathan walked down the road and knocked on the door of the only nearby neighbor he'd met so far, Mr. Patel, a retired engineer who had moved to the woods to paint and be left alone. The old man answered the door with a knowing look, as if he expected this visit. I got a letter, Nathan said. No name on it, no signature, just HOA-style garbage. Patel gave a slow nod. She called me last week. Woman said she was from the neighborhood standards office. Asked about your fire pit, your dog. Even asked if you had any exterior motion lighting. Nathan blinked. Did she give a name? Nope, Patel said. But I recognized the tone. She sounded like one of those HOA hawks from the cities. Back at the cabin, Nathan pulled out the letter again and stared at the phrase at the bottom. He typed it into his search bar, hoping for a match. And there it was, the same phrase. Compliant communities make stronger futures was plastered across old newsletters from Meadowstone Estates HOA, archived on their outdated website. Karen. She had found him, and she wasn't just watching, she was testing the water. Nathan kept the lights off that night, not out of fear, out of calculation. If Karen was watching, he wanted her looking into shadows. He sat by the living room window, blinds slightly parted, sipping stale coffee. The woods outside were silent except for the occasional owl call. But still, that feeling lingered. that someone was just outside the reach of the motion light, just close enough to count the steps to his door. He'd underestimated her. Karen Stillwell had once run Meadowstone Estates like a private kingdom. Rules were scripture. Violations were sins. And she was the priest, the jury, and the executioner. Nathan remembered her smug smile during those HOA meetings, always hiding behind technicalities, always ready with a binder full of obscure infractions. When he left Meadowstone, she told the board he was a cautionary tale. He hadn't given her a second thought since, but clearly she'd given him dozens. The next morning, Nathan drove into town. He stopped by the post office, not to mail anything but to speak with the clerk. A woman in her 60s with a sharp memory and zero patience for nonsense. He showed her the envelope from the week before and asked a simple question. Did this come through here? She eyed the barcode, then nodded. Nope. This one was routed through Meadowstone Distribution Center. That's for counties over any chance you can see the account that sent it. She shook her head, then leaned in. But I can tell you this, that barcode, it's part of a bulk business license, private. Probably one of those HOA offices. Nathan felt it click. It was Karen. She'd used the HOA's resources again. But why? Why go through the effort to stalk him after he'd moved out? What could she possibly gain? He got his answer the afternoon. Bertel came over with something clutched in his hand, a napkin, crumpled, with some scribbles on it. Phone call, he said. Woman left a voicemail on my landline after I didn't answer. Here's the number. Nathan dialed it. Blocked out. He ran the digits through a reverse lookup site. A name popped up. See? Stillwell. Charles, Karen's husband. So now it wasn't just letters. Now she was calling his neighbors, pretending to be local authority, trying to manipulate them into turning on him. It was the same tactic she'd used at Meadowstone. Divide and isolate. Turn the neighborhood into her eyes and ears. Feed fear. Collect power. Only now, Nathan wasn't in an HOA anymore. And she had no jurisdiction. He walked his property line, phone in hand, snapping pictures. No drones, no tire marks. But halfway up the slope near the tree line, he saw something strange. A little pile of rocks stacked in a spiral shape. Not natural, carefully placed. At the center was a small pink flag, like the ones utility workers used to mark cable lines. Karen had done this before. Back at Meadowstone, she used pink flags to mark areas of concern during inspections. The spiral was a message, a signature. Nathan crushed the rocks with his boot, took the flag, and carried it inside. He wasn't scared. He was done running. That night, he opened his laptop and started digging. Meadowstone's HOA still had a basic website, mostly outdated PDFs and meeting notes. But buried deep under the Resident Tools tab, he found something: Neurologin, portal to a private app called Harmony Command. He didn't have credentials, but he knew someone who could help. He called his niece, Leah, a cybersecurity intern with a particular love for challenges. When he told her what was happening, she didn't laugh. She paused, then said, "Give me an hour." While she worked, Nathan scrolled through his saved messages from Karen over the years-old HOA emails, newsletters, digital warnings. One line stood out from a 2022 email she'd blasted to the community. Compliance isn't just local. True, order requires reach. She wasn't just obsessed with rules. She was obsessed with control, no matter the zip code. An hour later, Leah called back. "You're not gonna like this," she said. "I already don't. She's watching more than just you, a lot more." Nathan closed his laptop slowly. This wasn't about an old grudge. Karen had built something bigger. And now, he needed to find out just how deep it went. Leah's voice crackled over the speaker. "It's not just you, Uncle Nate. She's watching at least 15 households, some in Meadowstone, some outside of it, a few in entirely different states." Nathan gripped the arm of his chair. "How?" She built an ecosystem, Leah said. "The app is called Harmony Command, but it's not just for rules. It's a surveillance pipeline. Residents upload infractions, photos, videos, addresses. The database links them by name, GPS coordinates, and cross-references them with county tax maps. Nathan felt his jaw tighten. Is it legal? Lear hesitated. Barely. She's not breaching private servers or emails, but she's using public data and packaging it to look official. Most people wouldn't question it. But here's the kicker, some of the users aren't even in Meadowstone anymore. They're part of something called Honor Guard. It looks like a volunteer enforcement club. Nathan stood and walked to the window. Outside, the lake shimmered under a pale sky, quiet, unbothered. But it wasn't peace. It was a trap with the volume turned down. She's making these people think they're still part of something, he muttered, even after they've moved away. It's a cult of enforcement. I also found your file, Lear added. It's labeled Category 3 non-compliant escaped. Escaped? There are images of your shed, your fire pit, your dog. One of them is time-stamped from last week. Nathan froze. I never saw anyone take photos. She's got drones in her registry, Lear replied. Some of them are FAA listed under her son's LLC. I pulled the flight logs. At least one flew directly over your land 4 days ago. He turned to his table, where the pink inspection flag circled like a rattlesnake. His hand balled into a fist. She's escalating. She's bored and power-starved, Leah said. And the moment you moved off-grid, you became her favorite puzzle. Nathan logged onto the public-facing Meadowstone HOA site. Most of it was garbage announcements, old agendas, an expired survey on pet leash lengths. But under a tab labeled Neighborhood Resilience, he saw something new, a banner for extended Harmony Partnership Zones. Clicking through, he found a list of neighborhoods not officially part of Meadowstone yet still influenced by its community model. His new neighborhood was one of them. Is she trying to franchise? He muttered. She's faking influence to justify contact, Leah replied. There's no contract, just implication. And the counties probably assume she has authority. Nathan rubbed his temples. It was bigger than a few letters. Karen was running a ghost HOA network, unofficial, invisible, and entirely reliant on illusion. The kind of thing that could wreck someone's life before they even knew who was behind it. And worse, she was growing it. He pulled out a manila folder from his cabinet, the one labeled Meadowstone HOA, keep for court. Just in case. Inside were old fines, inspection notices, and printed emails from Karen. It all seemed ridiculous at the time. He'd kept them as a joke, a grim reminder. Now they were the foundation. He grabbed a fresh notebook and scribbled for names. Karen Stillwell, Charles Stillwell, Daniel Stillwell, Hanorger contributors below that. He added to more words in big letters. Pattern, motive. This wasn't just petty harassment. Karen had transformed HOA authority into a remote control weapon. She didn't need proximity, she needed only one thing: submission. As long as her targets believed she still held power, she could make the illusion real. But he wasn't going to be her illusion anymore. I'm not letting her spread this, Nathan said aloud. What are you gonna do? Leah asked. He looked at the app screenshots Leah had sent over. Faces, names, IP logs, all collected and indexed by Karen herself. I'm going to pull the plug. But first, I want her to know I'm the one cutting the cord. That night, Nathan installed 3 new security cameras, then mounted a trail cam in the woods where the spiral rock pile had been. He left the pink flag right where Karen had placed it like bait. Let her send another drone. Let her file one more complaint. Because now, every click she made, every picture she uploaded, was being traced. She didn't realize she was logging into her own worst nightmare. 2 days later, Nathan finally got in. Leah had cracked a beta login to the inner network of Harmony Command Karen's private app turned surveillance empire. Using a false identity and location spoofing, Nathan created a profile under the alias Edward Trask, posing as a new resident in an Arizona suburb that was recently labeled a Harmony Partnership Zone. Within an hour of joining, Karen herself replied to his first post. Her message was short, efficient, and unsettling. Welcome, Edward. We believe in preventative harmony. If your community needs early-stage reinforcement, we'll provide the tools. Attached were two documents. One was a boilerplate compliance report form, eerily similar to county code sheets. The other was a downloadable flyer titled, Citizen-Led Order in Post-HOA America. He scrolled through the forum hundreds of posts from people across the country. Some were harmless enough, overgrown lawns, unregistered vehicles, but the deeper Nathan dug, the more sinister it became. There were threads where users gleefully shared footage of strangers' homes, dissecting everything, from curtain colors to mailbox dents. Every post tagged with a category level, minor, moderate, and escalation. Karen's account labeled Harmoniqueen 1 responded frequently, with chilling consistency, locked, watch list updated. Assigning remote monitor, she wasn't just operating an app. She was commanding an army. Nathan clicked into the watch list section. His stomach turned. His cabin was there labeled case number 091, non-compliant category 3. The drone photo from last week was uploaded with a note underneath. Observed live flame structure in forest zone. Known flight risk. Maintain pressure. Seek affiliate. Intervention. The implication was clear. Karen had branded him a problem, and now her volunteer watchdogs were authorized to take action. Nathan opened a private message window and typed a bait message to Karen. What's the protocol for? Repeat. Violators in non-regulated zones. She replied in 2 minutes. Non-regulated zones often need reminder visits. If your team lacks volunteers, we can assign a former Meadowstone resident, somewhere local to your area. His hand froze on the mouse. She had people in the area, possibly, watching already. And they didn't even know they were part of something illegal. Karen had weaponized nostalgia. Former HOA loyalists thought they were helping bring order to rural or unregulated areas, not realizing they were acting on falsified authority under a woman who hadn't had legal HOA control in over a year. Nathan knew what came next. He had to make her believe she was still in control long enough to open every door she'd built for herself. That night, Nathan crafted a report and uploaded it under Edward Trask. He flagged a nearby neighborhood park as non-compliant, included fake photos, and asked for support. Karen responded eagerly, offering to connect him with a regional honor guard agent. It worked. She gave him an IP address. A direct contact. Lear ran a trace. It pinged less than 12 miles from Nathan's property. He recognized the address. It was a ranch home owned by Daniel Stillwell, Karen's son. She'd planted him nearby. Nathan's pulse ticked upward. He hadn't seen the young man in over 3 years, not since he'd been a smug, clipboard-carrying horror errand boy. But now, Daniel was back, quiet, hidden, and flying drones on his mother's behalf. Nathan looked over at the trail cam memory card he'd pulled earlier that day. He hadn't reviewed it yet. He slid it into his laptop. The playback started. Quiet woods, wind shifting the trees. Then dash movement. A figure stepped into frame near midnight. Hooded, shorter build, likely Daniel. He knelt down, rearranged the pink flag, then held up his phone and took a picture. The same photo now posted on Harmony Command. It was confirmation. She wasn't guessing where he was. She was watching in real time. And using her own son to do it. Nathan exhaled slowly. He looked at his laptop screen, where her avatar Karen's smug face cropped from an old HOA flyer smiled from the top of the app. It was time. She wanted her digital kingdom. She wanted her shadow empire of order. He was going to turn it inside out, and he'd do it using her own code, her own rules, and her favorite tactic: exposure. 3 days passed in tense silence. Then came the envelope that changed everything. It arrived in a county-marked envelope, stamped and sealed, looking completely legitimate. Inside was a formal code enforcement notice, citing Nathan for unauthorized flame structure within a residential adjacent zone, a $1,400 fine, and a demand to dismantle his fire pit within 10 days or face legal action. Nathan's stomach tightened. This wasn't HOA mail anymore. This was real, He called the county office that afternoon. Calm but firm. "Who filed this complaint?" The woman on the line hesitated, then said, "An anonymous tip." "But the email associated with the file is unusual." She read the address aloud. Civic Guardian 73 at protonmail.com. Nathan didn't need to hear it twice. That was Karen's old forum username, one she'd used during her Meadowstone reign to post educational videos about lawn trimming heights and fence stain colors. He asked the clerk for a printed copy of the full complaint, then drove into town and picked it up in person. At the top was a grainy image of his fire pit at night, flames flickering, taken from an aerial view. He didn't even need to guess. It was from the drone. She had crossed the line. She had bypassed her expired authority, impersonated a civic watchdog, and pushed her complaint into a legal channel she had no business using. But Nathan didn't panic. Instead, he smiled, because this was the mistake he'd been waiting for. Back at the cabin, he spread everything across his kitchen table: the fake HOA letters, the drone footage, the app screenshots, Karen's messages under the alias Harmoniqueen1, the county complaint email, all of it documented, cross-referenced, and now linked by timestamps. And he had more: the drones. FAA registration, which Leah traced to Daniel Stillwell's LLC, was still live. That alone, when paired with the fire pit image submitted in a falsified complaint, was enough to trigger federal interest, unauthorized surveillance, possible stalking, fraudulent impersonation of a public official. He opened a new folder on his desktop and named it Project Exposure. Step by step, he drafted what he'd send to the county's legal department, the state attorney general, and if needed, the cybercrime division. Not just to clear his name, but to light up the entire shadow network Karen had built. Still, he knew something was off. Karen wasn't careless, obsessive, yes, power-hungry, always, but sloppy, no. Filing a complaint using her signature handle was unlike her. That's when Leah called again. "I've been watching the app's traffic. Karen's moving faster. She's logging more users, pushing out reports every day now. But something's different." "How so?" "She's not just using fake complaints. She's linking them to other people. I found reports filed under their names of real homeowners who have no idea." Nathan sat upright. "She's hijacking identities. More like borrowing. She's using public databases, tax records, sell notices, even obituary-related property transfers. She finds names that won't push back. She used mine because she wanted a reaction," Nathan said slowly. "The others, she assumed they wouldn't fight. She underestimated the wrong person," Leah said. That night, the drone came back. This time, Nathan was ready. He didn't shoot it down. He didn't run. He simply walked into the clearing with a flashlight, stared straight up at the lens, and held up a laminated sign that read, "Smile, Karen, you're being recorded." 2. He stayed there until the drone buzzed away. The next morning, he filed the complaint report to the county inspector general, complete with metadata from the email, FAA flight logs, and the cross-match to Daniel's LLC. Within hours, he got a call from a county investigator. "We've been hearing whispers about this woman," the man said. "But this is hard evidence." Nathan kept his tone even. "She's not just watching people. She's manipulating local government using private drones, fake citizen reports, and impersonating enforcement to build a digital empire." The investigator sighed. "You just handed us something big." Nathan ended the call and leaned back in his chair. He hadn't even started the real play yet. Because if Karen thought this was over a fire pit, she had no idea what he was about to ignite. Karen Stillwell didn't know it yet, but the rules she once wrote were becoming the bricks in the walls around her. Nathan was building them carefully, one violation at a time. The county had launched a quiet inquiry. The inspector general had forwarded his complaint to a regional ethics board. And in the meantime, Nathan kept feeding the fire. Every email, every drone sighting, every scraped screenshot from Harmony Command added another nail in her digital coffin. But that wasn't the real plan. The real plan was personal. Because Nathan remembered exactly how Karen operated, she didn't respond to facts, she responded to control being challenged. She was addicted to reaction. And that weakness, it was how he'd bring her empire down. He had Leah craft a digital honey trap. Using the alias Edward Trask, they submitted a dramatic new thread to Harmony Command, a homeowner refusing to comply. Caught on camera destroying a neighborhood playground, the footage was AI-generated but convincing blurred faces. Suburban backdrop, a timestamp that matched the app's submission guidelines. Within 30 minutes, Karen responded. Her post read, "Emergency status confirmed, escalation, authorized, affiliate reinforcement available upon request." It worked. Karen wasn't vetting data anymore. She was trusting her own system blindly, exactly what Nathan needed. They uploaded more. A chain of violations from a rogue homeowner group in a fictional subdivision called Cedar Hollow View. Fake addresses, fabricated incident reports, but everything formatted to mimic real reports from her database. Karen didn't even hesitate. She posted in the Honor Guard channel, assigning Daniel for field review, flight window open, local contact being notified. Double quotes Daniel. He was her drone operator, her quiet enforcer. But this time, Nathan had already alerted the FAA. His trap was set. That night, Leah sent a link to a screen-recorded session she had traced from Karen's activity. It showed the back end of Harmony Command, a dashboard filled with folders named by zip code and homeowner initials. Hundreds of reports, thousands of images. Nathan's folder was marked status, escalated. Inside it were photos he hadn't even seen once, taken from behind his shed, through the tree line. Someone had been on foot, not just drones. Real boots on his land. He felt a cold knot in his chest tighten. But he didn't flinch. Instead, he picked up the burner phone they'd set up under the alias. Dialed a public number Karen had posted in her Harmony neighborhood welcome kit, and let it ring. She answered on the fourth ring, crisp and poised. Harmony Command community line. "This is Karen." Nathan disguised his voice just slightly. "This is Edward Trask. Cedar Hollow View, we've had a breakthrough. You'll want to see it." She perked up instantly. "Send it through the normal portal. I'll review it personally. It's already uploading," he said. "Might take a few minutes. My Wi-Fi's unstable. Keep monitoring the subject. Reinforcement may be required. We're entering phase 2. Phase 2. Nathan smiled. That meant she would send something official. Something traceable. He hung up. 10 minutes later, a new email landed in Edward's inbox. A Harmony violation kit, complete with editable forms, legal-sounding language, and an HOA-styled banner that looked almost indistinguishable from a real county code sheet. It was perfect. Leah immediately ran the document through metadata filters. Hidden inside the file properties was the author's name, Karen Stillwell. The file's creation device matched an IP link to her old HOA desktop back in Meadowstone. It wasn't just a form, it was proof she had designed and distributed fraudulent code enforcement documents. OSS multiple state lines. Nathan stared at the screen, heart steady. The document was enough to justify a federal inquiry into impersonation of public officials and misuse of personal data. It was time to end it. He packaged everything into a final report and submitted it to the state attorney general's office, labeled Unauthorized Digital Regulation and Civil Harassment Evidence Packet, Harmony Command HOA Fraud Network. The response came faster than expected. "We've been receiving strange complaints from multiple counties. You've just connected the dots." They asked him not to go public yet, but they didn't say he had to stay quiet either. So Nathan did the one thing Karen would never expect. He uploaded a blurred, watermarked image of her app's backend, just one screen, into a public homeowners' rights forum, alongside a post titled, "What happens when one woman tries to be everyone's HOA?" It didn't include her name, but Karen would know it was hers. She'd recognize the color scheme, the formatting, the font, and that's when the messages on Harmony Command slowed, then stopped. Karen had just realized someone else had entered her kingdom, And they weren't there to join. They were there to burn the gates. Karen Stillwell hadn't slept. For 2 straight days, the Harmony Command backend had gone eerily quiet. The usual flow of surveillance photos and self-congratulatory incident reports had dwindled to a trickle. Her loyal honor guard volunteers had stopped posting. Some deleted their profiles altogether. And then came the real blow. One of her oldest digital lieutenants, under the handle Flagmaker2, posted a single sentence in the honor guard chat room. "I didn't sign up to impersonate the government. I'm out." She banned him instantly. But that didn't stop the dominoes. Within hours, the channel filled with confusion, questions, and vague accusations. Karen tried to keep control, writing long messages about temporary infiltration and deep state homeowner sabotage. But they backfired. The volunteers had never seen her panic before, and now the queen of calm compliance was spiraling in full view. Then her worst fear came true. A post appeared on the HOA subreddit, one of the largest forums in the US for HOA support and stories. It showed a screenshot of Harmony Command's interface with the title, "This app tracked me without permission. I never joined it. I moved 2 years ago." The user was real. A man named Curtis Lane from a neighborhood in Oregon, formerly under HOA control, now entirely independent. But somehow, Harmony Command had been logging and posting photos of his property without his knowledge. The post went viral. Lawyers started commenting. So did reporters. The story spread faster than wildfire. Phantom horror caught spying on US homeowners using volunteer drone network, and every person following it, every viewer watching it unfold. Karen knew exactly who had started it. Nathan. She hadn't heard from him directly, not since the day she received a compliance notice on her own mailbox printed with her own Harmony Command header, signed Edward Trask, Regional Oversight Monitor. It was his final message. And now, the fallout was accelerating. Back in his cabin, Nathan watched it all unfold with the calm of a man who already knew how the game would end. He didn't gloat. He didn't post again. He just waited. By the end of the week, Harmony Command was down. The app servers returned a 500 to gateway error. The forums disappeared. Karen tried to blame it on his cyberattack, but no one was buying it anymore. Leah had done more than just expose the app. She'd submitted its hosting credentials to cybersecurity officials and attached Karen's direct metadata trails. When the state stepped in to demand a takedown, the server company complied. Meanwhile, the FAA began investigating drone flight activity tied to Daniel Stillwell's LLC. Several counties launched separate inquiries about impersonated complaints and the emails Nathan had sent to local news channels. One of them finally aired a segment titled, "Retired HOA President Secretly Built Digital Enforcement Network. Victims Speak Out." Karen was never named yet, but her face, it showed up in blurred form, captured from her HOA newsletter days, matched with her quotes about compliance over chaos and regional order building. She recognized it immediately. She had become the villain in the very narrative she once controlled. And Nathan, he was already one step ahead. Because buried inside Harmony Command's infrastructure thanks to Leah's backdoor entry was a separate file folder labeled HOA Expansion, Private Funding Pledges. It contained donor names, Suburban addresses, and several off-the-record financial transactions between HOA boards and Karen's Harmony Outreach Committee. She had taken money from other HOA letters to spread her ghost model offering consulting in exchange for access to resident data. That wasn't just unethical. It was federal-level fraud. Nathan sent the evidence to a contact within the state attorney general's office, and for good measure, he sent copies to the homeowners themselves. A week later, half of those boards had filed formal reports against Karen. And then came the final twist. Nathan hadn't just been collecting information. He had filed for a federal whistleblower protection order 2 months prior under his real name, along with documentation proving that Harmony Command was a national privacy threat. Which meant when the federal investigators called, he answered on the record, not as a victim, But as the key witness, Karen still stood alone in her Meadowstone office, if you could still call it that. It used to be filled with binders, maps, printed HOA codes, and walls covered in pinned photos of non-compliant residences. Now it was quiet, nearly bare. Even the framed motto on the wall, "Order begins at the mailbox," was tilted, as if it knew what was coming. Outside, a county sheriff's cruiser sat idling. Inside, Karen was shredding documents by hand, her fingers trembling not from guilt, but from disbelief. She still didn't understand how it had unraveled so fast. She hadn't been arrested yet, but subpoenas had landed at her front door. Civil suits were stacking. Her son Daniel had already been charged with unlicensed surveillance and misuse of FAA-registered drones. Her bank accounts were frozen pending a fraud investigation. And every time she opened her laptop, another news headline showed her world disintegrating. But the worst part, she never saw it coming from him. Not Nathan. Not the man who once politely asked for a variance on his deck railing height and left HOA meetings early to walk his dog. He was supposed to be one of the quiet ones. She looked down at the final envelope on her desk. No stamp, no label, just the words, "Last violation." Open carefully. Karen peeled it open with shaking hands. Inside was a single photo. No letter, no insult, just an image. It showed her old honor guard login screen offline. Below it, a single line of text in red. "You built it to control others. I used it to free them." She dropped the photo as if it burned. Across the state, Nathan stood at the edge of his cabin's dock. Wind brushing through the trees. The lake reflected soft orange light as the sun fell behind the hills. He wasn't watching the news. He didn't need to. He already knew. He'd received word from the Attorney General's office that Karen had been formally disbanded from operating or advising any HOA or civic engagement group for life. More charges were pending based on financial disclosures from the HOA Expansion Fund. But Nathan wasn't celebrating. He was reflecting. It had never been about revenge for him. Not really. It was about truth. About stopping a system that was spreading like mold into people's homes, feeding on fear and compliance. Karen wasn't just an overzealous retiree. She had turned authority into a virus. And now it had been contained. Just as he turned to go back inside, his phone buzzed. A message from Lear. Harmony Command site went dark. Domain fully deregistered. Your nightmare is over, Uncle. And he smiled and typed back, "No, her nightmare just began." A few days later, he got one final surprise. A certified letter from the legal department of the Meadowstone Estates Board. Apparently, with Karen gone and a new board installed, several residents had come forward to confirm her abuse of power. They wanted to make things right. Nathan opened it. Inside was a refund check. Every fine he'd ever paid during his years in Meadowstone rolled up with interest. Attached was a handwritten note from the new board chair. "We read everything. You weren't the problem. She was." He folded the letter and tucked it away in a drawer. Not as a trophy, but as a record. A reminder that standing your ground, even against someone with a clipboard, a drone, and an obsession for order, could still mean something. Back in Meadowstone, Karen's mailbox sat empty. No more reports. No more photos. No more community to control. And the only horror rule that mattered now, she had violated the last one herself. Know when to stay gone.